My name is Esther Guado, and I am from Beverly. I got a predatory mortgage 2 years after I immigrated into this country, and I've been fighting for my home for about 10 years. As a student of doctorate of public health, I believe that housing is a determinant of health, and I know there are so many other immigrants who are in similar circumstances like myself. So I am in support of this bill, and I hope that you can pass it today. Thank you.
You should tell them how many times you tried to get it.
I have tried to apply for modification for more than 10 times for a period of 10 years, within a period of 10 years.
So I wanted Esther to say that because I know that you guys hear these stories, but it's still true that people are trying over and over again to get loan modifications. And this bill, just to clarify, I think Roxanne tried to get at this, but this bill is not actually authorizing the municipalities to do anything, right? The issue was that when Springfield tried to pass ordinances, a question got sent to the SJC about whether municipalities could pass ordinances or not related to foreclosures within their traditional health and safety powers, right? This is the authority that cities and towns already have. And the SJC basically said the record is silent between the legislature and the towns about whether towns have the ability to use their traditional powers to do something about foreclosure. And we're going to assume, because the record is silent, that municipalities were not meant to use their powers around foreclosure, that was meant to be reserved to the legislature. Of course, the thing is that we haven't had a foreclosure crisis this bad since probably 1763, and I've been researching. We're more than 3 times the worst in the Great Depression. So we reach back, and it looks like the lead up to the American Revolution is the last time it was this bad. So needless to say, cities and towns hadn't tried to use their police powers to do anything about foreclosure. There had been no major crisis. The house wasn't burning down, so to speak. And so they hadn't done anything. So the reason the record was silent was because there had been no reason to speak. So one of the things that the SJC said basically was, well, if we had anything from the legislature making it clear that the traditional powers for cities and towns can be used for this, then we wouldn't have said they couldn't do it. So that's why this got filed, and that's why we're asking for it. In theory, a brave city or town could go out and do it anyway, and make the argument in court that they have the right to do it. But as we know, our cities and towns already don't have the local aid they need. They certainly aren't going to be in a place to jump out and fight the wealthiest institutions in the world in court over whether they have these powers or not. So it's urgent, and it's urgent because the foreclosures are going back up. I don't know how many of you have been contacted by constituents. I know we used to get calls, it's beginning again, from some of your offices with people when they've got a constituent who has a foreclosure problem, and these things are so wicked complex, and we more than welcome your reaching out to us for constituents because it's so hard to untangle this. But for context, we did a research because we were asked by some of the lawyers who were getting together at a conference that we were hosting on whether the banks are continuing to do the same procedural, questionable activities that they were doing in terms of mortgaging and foreclosures. And we identified 120 common practices that violate either mortgage or foreclosure law in Massachusetts. And of those 120 practices, I do a lot of the intake across the state, and our experience is that in most of these cases, in any one person's story from the beginning of when they got the mortgage that's being foreclosed on all the way through the foreclosure itself, that there's 10 to 20 of the violations on that list of 120. And that list of 120 are all things that in one place or another in our court systems, the judges have said, usually the SJC, that each one of those separately would render a foreclosure, the legal term, void, as if it had never happened because it was illegal by operation of law. And so these are very serious problems. When the numbers go up, it doesn't mean that the bank's practices have gotten better or worse. They continue to be very questionable at best. And so the problem here is that if people get foreclosed and they don't have the backing of their city or town, they don't have basic programs like mediation, so that, for instance, Esther could have gotten someone from the bank who was authorized to sit with her. You know, maybe folks make the mistake because of her accent of thinking she's not well enough educated to understand all of this. She is. She's been doing her own research and she knows what's going on. If she could go face to face with an authorized representative of the bank where they have to have all the papers in front of them. Nice thing about mediation, the mediators do the piece of making sure everybody's got their documentation, none of this, oops, I don't have what I need. She would probably get a resolution, because that's what mediation shows around the country. And there's been, you know, disagreement among the bankers about what they feel about mediation in this state, but the folks who participated come out with pretty good resolution, right? It's the requirement is they sit down, not that they come to agreement. So if Lynn had a 97% agreement rate, that was freedom of choice of the folks in the room to agree, right? Mutually agreed upon, no beating anybody over the head agreement. So we need this, and we need it this fall, because this body was not able to act for various reasons on some of the legislation in front of you, but the cities and towns need to be able to, and they need to know that no one's going to be able to say to them if they do something in their traditional powers that they're going to get sued for it because the SJC said that they thought the legislature meant, maybe silent on the record, to keep the powers to themselves. Worcester had a cash bond program which required the banks to put down $5,000 when they entered into the foreclosure process with somebody. That $5,000 was a bond. It went back to the bank if the bank repaired the property. They were able to protect 800 properties, and the money went back to the banks for whatever wasn't spent by the city. But you can imagine being a city the size of Worcester, somewhere around 180,000 people, having one day 3 weeks ago, I think, we had 5 auctions on that day. The home value of those 5 buildings together, and these were all owner-occupied buildings, was $825,000 in one day. Almost $1 million in property home value was taken in just the city of Worcester. So you can imagine the importance of the city not having to upkeep that property without a cash fund to do it. This is a problem now in all of our major cities. When the foreclosures dropped down, they were still at a historic level, well beyond the early 1990 foreclosures, but at that time, all of you, every single district had foreclosures in it, and the rates were bad everywhere. Now that they're spiking again, it's the gateway cities that were hit hardest first are being hit hardest again. And Worcester County is the hardest hit where I live, and the city of Worcester is the hardest hit in the state. And the city of Worcester has two programs sitting on its books that it can't use right now because they're afraid of getting sued. But this bill would unlock that. So, thank you.
Thank you.